Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you all doing today? It's time for some Road to Gold, and today I have two games for you. One with a list that's a little bit different, and one with the standard list that I've been running for the past 2 weeks. And both games are interesting, and I learned a fair amount about Soulblight Gravelords whilst doing it. Now, this is episode 2 of what will likely be a 4-part series, so if you haven't seen the first episode, be sure to check that out before you watch this one. Links down below. Also, if you want more Road to Gold stuff, Season 1 is fully available. I go through Untamed Beasts over the course of around about 3 months. So check that out if you want a good time with some chaos goodness. But with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. So my first game was against Road to Gold regular Joe Pains and his Cruel Boys, and he was running a Morgok, a Thug, a Bolt Boy Boss, a Clawback, a Stabgrot, Shank, and Herc the Howler, which is quite the lineup of horrifyingly powerful things, and I was running something a little bit cheeky. If you aren't aware, Warhammer World allow the use of monsters, even though most places don't, including most of the TTS League. But since I am practicing for Warhammer World, Joe allowed me to use a zombie dragon, and it was a pretty fun time. Basically, the list consisted of Zondara, her 3 zombies, some more zombies, and a zombie dragon, bringing the list to a whopping 7-man. Now, a 7-man list is really important because once you hit 7-man, you can have 2 deployments of 3 and 1 deployment of your zombie dragon. And at this point, you basically have a warband that kind of feels like a 9-man warband. Just one of those models takes up 3 models, which is kind of weird, but once you factor in how monsters operate and how they move with 1 action at a time with 3 actions over the course of a turn, it kind of makes sense. Going into this mission, I was a little bit concerned just because there's a lot of things that are incredibly dangerous here. Monsters are terrifyingly powerful, however, most of them can just be killed by your standard beaters. Morgok could probably kill a zombie dragon, Clawback could probably kill it, and the Bolt Boy Boss will chunk it for days. So I had to be a little bit careful with this one, and in this game, it's Brutal Encounter, I decided that because of how they deployed, I was unable to safely move my zombie dragon and have it have any impact on the game. So it went balls to the wall, it flew up, and it used its quad turn 1. It was a quad 6 as well, so it's a pretty darn good quad for that pestilent breath. And it just chunked a whole bunch of dudes. It killed Shank, heavily wounded the Clawback, and heavily wounded Herc the Howler. It was pretty darn brutal, but now of course the zombie dragon is a little bit exposed. Morgok can't quite get to it, but that Clawback is far faster and can definitely just charge in with charge and get in there and just start smashing. And that's basically what happened. The Clawback just ran in and just started clubbing with his big old clubs, and the zombie dragon was well and truly chunked, being brought down 1 whole bracket. So when the dragon swung in again over the next 2 actions, it wasn't actually able to kill the Clawback. Although the Clawback did take a fairly hefty chunk of damage, it is still an almost fully functional zombie dragon. Other than the suicidal zombie dragon plays, everything else just kind of played cagey. This was Brutal Encounter, so we do have those rather funky quarters, and I really wanted the advantage turn 1, so I did my usual straddling technique where everything is holding 2 quarters at once, which means they're holding nothing, and this more or less forced my opponent to take a quarter, and that gave me advantage going forward. Going on to turn 2, my Zondara zombies walked onto the field, and so did his Bolt Boy Boss, and now I'm a little bit concerned because the Bolt Boy Boss is really hard to deal with because it's defended by a Thug, and the Bolt Boy Boss is rather brutal and very efficient at killing things like zombies and low wound chaff. But before all of that became a problem, Joe had initiative and the Clawback clobbered the ever-living snot out of that zombie dragon and it died, which is pretty darn unfortunate. That thing is 540 points, but the Clawback is nearly dead, so I deliver the killing blow with Zondara's Wizard Bolt and then position her so Morgok can't get to her this turn, but should be sufficiently tempted to give it a go anyway. Of course, Zondara being Zondara, she did use Grave Breaking once to get her Zondara zombies, Pick, Crack Tomb and Toil up the board a little bit faster, and they moved in towards his Stabgrot and also provided another potential distraction for Morgok, he now has two directions to go. It's either go down and try and chase down Zandara, or go up and try and take on those zombies. And honestly, neither are fantastic options, because being Zandara's zombies, or just Zandara herself, Zandara's faster and her Zandara zombies can move incredibly fast and just outrun Morgok if they really wanted to. So he's in a bit of a difficult position here. In the end, he did decide to go after Zandara, which I would say is actually the right choice here. Taking out Zandara would mean you score points every single turn of the game for the remainder of the game, because she is a hero. However, he couldn't get to her this turn, which is completely fine by me. He also sends in Thug for support, running across the board and making his way towards Zandara. Of course, being an Iron Jaws brute, Thug might take a little while to get there, but he is on his way. And then we get the first of many whiffs by the Bolt Boy boss. Now, the Bolt Boy boss didn't do terribly, it just didn't kill anything. Every time it fired, it left the thing it fired at on between 1 and 4 wounds. Every single time. It never once killed a zombie, which is rather impressive. But the dice just weren't dicing for the Bolt Boy boss, and it just kind of threw out a bunch of whiffers. He was chunking the damage, but the zombies just kept on running away, and the injured zombies specifically were running out of range of the Bolt Boy boss, which then kind of forced the Bolt Boy boss over the course of the game not really to move and then fire at other zombies that were in range that also weren't injured. So by the end of the game, the Bolt Boy boss had fired a whole bunch of volleys, but just left me with a whole bunch of kind of wounded zombies who then just kept on running away and out of his maximum range. So it didn't really work out for him, and ultimately the Bolt Boy boss was dealt with by just being ignored and hiding behind cover out of his range. And in the end, I had a line of zombies hiding behind a line of sight blocking terrain in a conga line, and it looked rather funny, but it also meant they were completely safe. The last thing on turn 2 of note is that Morgok moved south towards my table edge basically and abandoned his stab grot, and this allowed my Zandara stuff to basically surround this one stab grot and then beat him to death. So the stab grot was killed, scoring me some extra points, and since I had zombies scattered around basically everywhere at this point, I also scored bonus points thanks to the quota's secondary. This does take me in the lead now, so he now has access to the brutal encounter twist, which is basically you lose an action on one guy, and this is especially scary when I am being chased by a Morgok and a Thug, and Zandara is reduced to just one action. It's also important to note here that Herc the Howler did actually sucker punch one of the zombies, but that actually played into my advantage going forward, and we'll see how on turn 3, which is now. So turn 3 goes forward, Zandara is debuffed, the Bolt Boy boss does some whiffing, and now Thug is charging towards Zandara, and also Morgok is charging towards Zandara. Thankfully, despite being caught by Morgok, Zandara didn't die. She did survive just the one swing that he had, and Thug had to just basically sprint in to get to Zandara. So it's the case that Zandara is now engaged by Thug and Morgok and near death, and that's a little bit of a problem. But then I see the solution, and that is to disengage and summon a zombie in engagement range with Morgok and Thug. The reason this is so important is that neither of them have a range 2 weapon, so if they spend an action to disengage, they can't get into engagement range to attack Zandara, so one of them has to kill the zombie, and if they can't do that on their activation on turn 4, then Zandara is completely safe. Other than that, my zombies are just moving around doing zombie stuff, holding those quotas, and we go into the final turn, and of course the Bolt Boy boss now realizes that he has no targets because he's too far away, and because of the line of sight blocking terrain and the distance to the zombies, he would have to double move to get line of sight to fire, and Zandara is out of range too, so the Bolt Boy boss is just kind of like stranded in this corner, unable to do anything, which is really good for me. And now we get to the make or break moment of this game. Can this one zombie survive against Morgok and Thug, or just one of them, long enough that Zandara can't get caught and brutally murdered? I haven't lost any more zombies, so I need this zombie to die at the right point so I can then use Zandara to resurrect that same zombie again and body block again and then run away. So Thug started swinging at the zombie, and with Unfeeling Flesh I survived the first swing but died on the second. This takes Thug out of commission and allows Zandara to resummon the zombie who just died directly in front of Morgok, and then she fled, which meant Morgok could not get to Zandara at all, and this massive chunk of points that were chasing her, in the end, only managed to kill a zombie. And the worst part is, the zombie who I summoned in front of Morgok failed to kill, which is even worse. We didn't even score the point for the kill due to how the wording works for resurrections and any kill mission. So in the end, this was a win for the Soulblight Gravelords, even though the big ass dragon died really early, and I didn't damage the Bolt Boy boss, I didn't damage Thug, and I didn't damage Morgok. All of his big hitters were not injured at all, apart from the clawback who died to the zombie dragon, I guess. But you get the idea. I won this game with a mixture of luck and using the limited resources I had left to dance around and just do the secondary and win that way and pick off all of his weaker stuff like Shank and the Stab Grot, and it worked really well. You definitely need to have a 7-man list to get this to work, and Zandara works perfectly because the list works thanks to having more actions than a 7-man warband should have, more activations. So the zombie dragon has 3 activations. He's basically 3 models. I then have 6 more models. I have 9 activations basically, which means my 7-man warband is actually a 9-man warband in terms of actual action economy. But then you throw in Zandara, and she gets all of her named zombies to move again on a double, and you can do this twice. So they're all getting an extra move action or 2, or basically an extra activation each if I use it twice, giving me closer to something like 11 activations worth of actions in any given turn, providing everything's still alive. And of course, when I deploy, I still get those juicy 3-man deployments with Zandara plus 2 zombies and the 3 Zandara zombies, which means in most matchups I'm not outnumbered turn 1, even if I get the zombie dragon on turn 1 because he activates 3 times anyway. So it kind of works out in the end, and it feels really good. The issue is, if that zombie dragon dies, all of your kill potential goes out of the window. But the zombie dragon is a lot of fun. His base is very clunky, but he's very fast. He has fly. His quad is very good. He's got some pretty good doubles and triples. He's a solid all-around bloke. But for 540 points, you could take just about anything else. Honestly, for that, you could just take like a Vargulf Courtier from the Flesh Eater Courts and get a pretty comparable model in terms of damage output. You do lose that rather brutal quad, and I'm not going to beat around the brush. If you get a high quad with the zombie dragon, that pestilent breath is unbelievably powerful. It will just chunk everything in a fairly large radius. It's horrendously powerful and a lot of fun to use. But also don't forget that this guy has access to Dragon Maul, which is one of the best abilities in the whole game, just allowing you to pick a guy and just pull them into engagement range and then eat them basically, doing huge amounts of damage. Very effective for killing individual models from basically anywhere, or just moving them out of position because it's a placement effect. It's very silly. So this list is a lot of fun. I don't think I'm going to run this list at Warhammer World, as fun as it may be to do, simply because it's a little bit too gimmicky, and I really enjoyed playing the last Furlane plus Knight of Shrouds combo that I've been running in the last few games. So I'm going to put a pin in the zombie dragon list for now, and maybe come back to it in the future for a future event. I do have a undead dragon lying around, so I could potentially cobble something together at the last moment for a future event like UK Games Expo, and have some fun with Zandara and a zombie dragon. But we'll see how that pans out when we get to it. Going on to game 2, I'm once again playing Brutal Encounter. Apparently the only mission that ever rules is Brutal Encounter, which is actually a fairly good thing to practice. Brutal Encounter is one of the missions that always appears at Warhammer World, and it's one that you really want to get good at because that twist is devastating. So you want to be able to learn how to play around it, play with it, and get the most out of this mission, potentially more than any other mission in Ferocious Gnarlwood, so I'm not overly concerned that I'm playing this mission so many times. It's a mission that you really need to practice if you're looking to go to Warhammer World. It is one of the more bullshit missions. So for this game, I'm up against Grok and his Black Talons. He has dropped Shakana Golden Blade for 2 Cities of Sigmar Battle Priests, who are basically just really cheap, like 55-point allies. Other than that, we've just got a whole bunch of the Black Talons with some blessings here and there. For example, Larai, the Child of the Abyss, I believe had +1 strength, and Neve was also buffed, I believe, with +1 damage. So a little bit scary. The Black Talons are always a scary thing to face because they can just blend through things. They've got bonus moves, bonus attack actions. Larai is an absolute blender. Neve is an absolute blender. Rostis is an absolute tank. And I've got to deal with all of these, and there's not much that is vulnerable to my shenanigans with my Knight of Shrouds and Lost Verlaine, so it was a little bit spooky on how I wanted to deal with this one. Thankfully, I did have the numbers advantage. I had 9 to his 6, and the list I ran is my usual list. I'll put it on screen now. Badoosh. It's a pretty funky list, and turn 1 had me doing some pretty questionable things. So Neve was basically on her way right away. Neve is incredibly fast, and she has a Rostis to help her just slingshot across the board, and also a Hendrik to sling her across the board. She was definitely going to get into combat, and there wasn't much I could do to stop that. So Zondara became the bait, which is really risky in a game like Brutal Encounter because heroes are worth a lot of points when they die, especially if they die on turn 1. And I was basically sending Zondara out to die, but not without doing a little bit of damage first. So Neve was whipped up the board and got into range of Zondara, and then Zondara just unleashed her Wizard Bolts and did a whopping 12 damage, which heavily chunked Neve, but not enough to deter her from getting into Zondara's face and tearing her a new one. Zondara very quickly died. It is Neve Black Talon with like 6 attacks, strength 5, 3, 4 damage. Zondara had no chance. She was completely mulched, but that was by design. I was a little bit concerned that after taking that massive Wizard Bolt hit, Neve would actually back off and go do other things. But no, she dedicated to the bit. She charged in, she climbed some terrain, and she just badooshed and slammed Zondara into the grave. And this set me up perfectly to then send in Lost Verlaine. So with Zondara dead, Verlaine then jumped into action. He reacted, gained +1 move, +2 attacks, then used Vampiric Agility to climb the building where Neve was and just stand still for next turn. Verlaine is now pretty swole, 7 attacks, strength 5, 2, 6 damage, is nothing to scoff at, and he's in base contact with Neve. So someone's going to die next turn, and it hopefully will be Neve and not my guy. Elsewhere, Larai flies around and starts firing Wizard Bolts, but gets a little bit too close, so I was able to send some zombies up there and then tie her up into combat, which meant she'll be wasting time disengaging if she wants to fire again, which keeps my zombies nice and safe. And then the final trap was triggered. Zondara dying is really bad on turn 1 unless you are undead and you have a Knight of Shrouds. I had Knight of Shrouds, he used a triple, he resurrected Zondara on 6 wounds, and then he flew his 20 inches directly into the turn 2 deployment of my opponent. This is hugely important because his turn 2 reinforcements are 2 heroes. They are the Battle Priests, and Battle Priests are not very good at being not dead. So this Knight of Shrouds is going to cut through them like butter, and ideally Verlaine will slice right through Neve, giving me 3 hero kills and basically winning the game on turn 2. Of course, assuming it all works out like I want it to. Going on to turn 2, I have initiative, and Lost Verlaine goes in and rips Neve Black Talon in half effortlessly. 14 attacks, hitting on 4s, 2-6 damage. I rolled something like 36 damage, killing Neve outright. Of course, Neve was already injured, so this was massively overkilled, but even if Neve was fully healthy, Lost Verlaine would have killed her outright, which was pretty darn impressive. Seeing the horrors of the Knight of Shrouds as well down in his deployment, about to slice to all of his guys, he starts to redirect Rostis in that direction, which makes sense, and the Knight of Shrouds fairly effortlessly just slices through one of those Battle Priests, giving me another hero kill on turn 2, bringing my hero kills to 2, and basically scoring me 6 bonus points over the course of the game, which is pretty darn disgusting. Due to the zombie hordes that are surrounding Lorai had to disengage and started firing wizard bolts. She didn't do too well, not killing another zombie, but she's now sort of like met up with Rostis, and for turn 3 things are looking a little bit spicy. Rostis is close enough to potentially get to the Night Shrouds on turn 4 and kill him, and I don't really want that to happen. So I send in a zombie to tag Lorai and Rostis, and this forces them now to deal with that threat. In the meantime, the Night Shrouds kills the second Battle Priest, giving me 3 hero kills by turn 3, and then Lost Verlaine goes absolutely apeshit. This guy just jumps off the building he's on, moves his 6 inches towards Hendrik, who moved up slightly out of position, getting himself perfectly in range for the Lost Verlaine to get in there. And with 8 attacks thanks to Onslaught, Hendrik was one-tapped. I did 30 flat damage, tearing Hendrik in half. And this leaves the Black Talons with only 2 models left, one being Lorai, one being Rostis, and me scoring a passive 3 points per turn, and I haven't lost anything yet. And my zombies are just taking the quarters, and I have 9 guys to his 2, and if he kills a guy, I can very easily resurrect him back at full health, and there's not much he can do to stop this tide of the undead. So naturally my opponent concedes, and honestly I am not surprised. When games are this heavily stacked against you, a concede in a friendly does kind of make sense. So the Black Talons were well and truly slaughtered, and it really boils down to Verlaine. Verlaine is such a swingy piece of shit, having crit 6 in a whole bunch of attacks and a decent amount of durability and speed. This guy just gets in, and if he starts rolling those 6s, he's ripping things in half at then nothing. Killing Neve Black Talon and Hendrik cleanly is something ridiculous, like 400 plus points killed by a guy who's only 195 or something, right? He completely just tore a hole through a third of his warband, and the rest just died to the Night Shrouds. And that is a weakness of this specific Black Talons list, going into a Ferocious Gnarlwood 2 style kill mission where you score bonus points on hero kills. Taking Battle Priests makes a lot of sense when you want to buff up your numbers. It is not a great idea to have them in a kill mission in Ferocious Gnarlwood 2, because once they're caught and they die, they farm points for your opponent, right? They die too quickly, they don't have the offensive stats, they don't have the defensive stats, they are purely there because they are cheap throwaway allies that you can just take. And that is just the perfect target when I have a Lost Verlaine who's very fast, but more importantly, I have a Knight of Shrouds who is disgustingly fast. And I think the final nail here is that I really like zombies. So in the first game against Joe and in the second game, having 10 wounds on zombies every single time has proven to be so much more valuable than having toughness 4 but only 8 wounds on your standard skeleton. These zombies reliably stay alive in extra attack or even 2, and it makes them very sticky, and then you resurrect them back at full wounds and your opponent has to do it again. And every time this happens, it just adds more and more fuel to the fire that zombies are the better choice over skeletons. As good as skeletons are, I am just a huge nerd over zombies now apparently, and this 9-man list is really good. I've had some pretty big whiffs against Caradon Overlords specifically. Last week I lost to Caradon Overlords, and if you look at the up and coming or just released Raw and Uncut battle reports where I'm against Fireaxe, I also have a pretty rough game against him. And piloting this list requires a fair amount of knowledge. So Soulblight Gravelords are incredibly powerful. They're a very strong faction, and because of that, it's very easy to get lost in the idea that you can basically play fast and loose and kind of still win because they're so universally good. I haven't really struggled that much in most of my games because the list just has the tools. But against certain lists, if you play it the wrong way, you are really in danger of just being tabled. You can very easily get overconfident with the Soulblight and then start taking heavy casualties and lose games very quickly. And this has happened once or twice, which you will see at some point. All that being said, I'm a huge fan of this list, and I am going to lock this in, I think, for Warhammer World or some variation of this. I've got all the models on my desk just over here, being built, ready to be painted. and I am super excited to bring it to the tabletop and start playing people in Warhammer World and seeing how well I do. I am of course aiming for gold, but as per usual there are a lot of really good players who attend Warhammer World, so it might not quite go as high as I would like it to, but we will see when the time comes. And that's the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, please leave a like, a comment and subscribe down below. And until next time, lads, ladies and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.